Okay, good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to today's Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee meeting. The Guildhall clock is just chiming 4 o'clock, so we'll make a start with the notice and summons of meetings, and then member attendance and apologies can hand to Denise to do the roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. You're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee, a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall, 16th of January at 4 p.m. And I'll proceed to take the roll. Alderman Darren Guy. Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Here, Denise.
Alderman Nairi McMorris.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw Denise online.
Councillor Sean Carr. Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor Emmett Doyle.
Here.
Councillor Stephen Edwards. Councillor Patricia Logue. Councillor John McGowan.
Shaw.
Councillor Philip McKinney. Councillor Maeve O'Neill.
Here online.
Councillor Martin Riley.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Darren, I'm here. I couldn't get myself unmuted.
Sorry, can people hear me okay? And item, I was just saying, I have no chairperson's business, and no one's approached me seeking to come in under chairperson's business. So we're going to move on to item 6, which is the matters arising from the open minutes of Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee held on the 21st of November, pages 3 to 6. So we'll take those for accuracy first. Thanks, Councillor Doyle. Proposed for accuracy, a seconder for accuracy. But you are that, but yeah, that's okay, Patricia, thank you. So someone online, if you can accept them for accuracy.
I'll second them if you need a seconder, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. And then any matters arising out of the minutes. I'm not seeing anyone indicating speaks. We're going to take those as approved, thank you. And that moves us to item 7, which is the risk management strategy. There's quite a few strategies and policies in today's agenda, so I'm going to hand over to Denise to take us through item 7.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, as the Chair has advised, we have a number of policies that we're seeking your approval on today, and the first is the risk management strategy. Members will be aware that we do have a risk management strategy in place for Council with effect from the 1st of April 2015. It was reviewed and updated in 2017, 2019 and again now just prior to Christmas. This risk management strategy forms part of our Council's internal control and corporate governance framework. The main objectives of the strategy are to provide a framework that enables Council to achieve its strategic objectives in a consistent and controlled manner, to improve decision-making, plan and prioritisation of activities and enhance the understanding of opportunities and threat, to safeguard the Council's assets and create an environment where all staff assume responsibility for risk management. For members' information, the policy has been screened and the process concluded it will not have any adverse equality or rural impacts in any of the Section 75 groups. There are no other implications arising from the report, and I would seek members' endorsement and approval of the strategy, but happy to take any questions or comments on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denise, for that. Members going to open it up to the floor if anyone has any questions coming out of the papers that are there. So I'm happy to take questions. Yeah, Councillor Doyle, go ahead.
Chair, thanks for letting me in there. It might be a moot point, but I think given the range of discussions that we've all had over the last number of months with regards to setting the rates for next year, I think it's fair to say that there may well be a risk that this council might be in a position where possibly rates might not be set by the date that is set out. What processes are in place should something like that arise? Yeah, I suppose I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Doyle. Any other questions before bringing in officers in relation to responses? Yeah, Councillor Lowe, go ahead.
It's not a question, just as she said at the start, there is a number of policies, either new or updated, mainly I think the most of them are. Would it be possible in the future if we could just get highlighted the changes? If that was possible, I think it would make it easier for... Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Logue. I don't see any other indicated speakers, so I'm going to bring in officers just on the 2 points. Councillor Doyle's first. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. And just in direct response to that, the lead legal services officer is currently looking into that matter and will provide that advice forthwith.
Councillor Logan, in terms of your comment, that's a really good comment and we'll take that on board and do that in future. If I can just advise members in relation to these policies, there's not many changes. Anything significant I will draw to your attention, but it's really just to review and update them in light of best practice guidance. But we were already implementing best practice guidance, so there's very few changes that you need to be aware of. The main change is in relation to item 9, the gifts and hospitality policy. Our previous policy was applicable to officers and members. This one is only for officers because the performance improvement and Ellen and her team, they're developing a suite of policies for members. So it was more appropriate to remove the members from this one and just keep this one as officers. That's the main change, but we'll definitely take that on board for future. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not hearing anyone dissenting from the papers as presented, so we're going to take them as approved. If members are content to move on, which is then item 8, which is the conflict of interest policy. Denise.
Thanks, Chair. Again, members, we already have a conflict of interest policy in place, agreed back in 2017, reviewed in 2019, and just reviewed and updated again. As I've just stated to Councillor Logue, there's very few changes in this policy. The purpose of the policy is to ensure that actual, potential or perceived conflicts of interest are identified and managed in a way that safeguards the integrity of staff and maximises public confidence in the Council's ability to deliver public services properly. There are no implications from the report, and I can just give members assurance that in terms of this policy, we do have a very accurate conflicts of interest register, which is reviewed and updated very regularly by our officers. So there's no significant changes to that report, but just updated to reflect best practice guidance. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Any questions? And if not, a proposer for that item? Councillor Doyle, thanks. And Councillor Logue, second, and thank you. Okay, members, item 9 then is the gifts and hospitality policy, which Denise has indicated there is some changes on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the main change in this one, members, is that our previous policy, which was in place in 2015 and 2017, related to members as well. But in discussion with the lead performance improvement officer, we felt that it was appropriate that this one now was more specific to officers, and that, as I say, the lead officer, Ellen, she will be developing and updating the policies for members, so they will come forward to using you in a matter of time. This policy is specific for officers, but again, again, no real changes in relation to the last policy, just taking into account again our best practice guidance. And we will reiterate to all our officers in terms of gifts and hospitality. But as we were saying, we, you know, as officers, we receive very few offers of gifts and hospitality currently. So there's not much to record in the register, but at least it's there from a good governance perspective. But again, no implications arising from this report. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise. Again, happy to take any questions now, and if not, a proposer and a seconder for the items. People are content with it? Yeah, Councillor Logue, go ahead.
Second.
Okay, Councillor Logue, just as a question first, so I'll bring her in and then I'll come back for a proposer.
Just given that this doesn't, this policy is not for councillors and the new one has been developed as the old one, that's one we're working under, councillors are working under at the minute, just until it's replaced, yes.
Yeah, I think that's the way. Councillor Logue, yep. Okay, there was, I think, 2 people come in online. I'm not sure who they were, so can you repeat again if you're happy to propose them, please?
I'll propose. There's Philip here, Martin. I'll propose.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McKinney. A seconder, please. Councillor Logue, thank you. Okay, members, that leads us to item 10, which is the policy for the purchase and supply of supplies and services in the panel of contractors.
Thanks, Chair. Again, members, this is a policy that we've already had in existence in 2015 and we've reviewed it in 2017, 2020 and now again. Very few changes in relation to this policy, just taking into account, as I say again, best practice guidance and tightening up some of the individual items in it from an audit perspective, really for officers to ensure whenever they're getting quotations, things like that, but nothing significant that members need to be brought to your attention. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Denise. I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah, Councillor Doyle, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And if this isn't a conversation to have with regards to this particular paper, officers, feel free to stop me. But what I've read in it is all common sense, and that's great. But we passed a motion of full council a number of months ago with regards to community wealth building. The impact of that being that we should, we obviously try to maximise the amount of local businesses within the district that are the tender for services or products that the council have put out to tender. Over the last 5 years, having looked into this, just over about 16 million out of 100 million spent on a range of items, whether that be just individual capital programs or just throughout the whole procurement process. Only just about 16.5 million pounds has been spent by companies within the city and district, which is very, very low. Now, naturally, has to be said, of course, we're following process. No one has done anything that they shouldn't be doing. But I think we do have that responsibility to try and maximise that. It is our corporate position that we would utilise what's known as the Preston model. And over the last number of months, my part have been doing a bit of work in terms of trying to identify what we can do better. And I recently had a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, who have nothing but praise for our own business team and council in general. But in having this conversation in public, there's been a number of dairy businesses, which I won't name, who have come to me and said, council utilises a lot of services that it could be utilising in dairy. Some of them actually at a lower price. And I can't remember which member it was, had raised an issue similar to this previously. But essentially, I think our policy needs to, within the confines of social clauses and all those, the apparatus that we can use, we need to be doing more to ensure and facilitate dairy and Strabane or businesses within the district being able to avail of our practices. And there's a bit of, I've asked Kevin from the business team if he can do a bit of ongoing work. I've also asked Colin for some stats as well, because whilst at this point there's no indication that there's a massive issue with our policies, I think that I would prefer that at this point this be deferred until such times as we can get a look at those stats, and I'm happy to share them with members because, you know, if it turns out that we could be doing some things better, whether that be the sizing of lots, for example, to ensure that people are being priced out, that we're trying our best to do what we can within the framework of procurement to ensure that our local businesses are being able to avail of it better. I would much prefer that we do that, because one of the issues that's been brought to me recently is, you know, a company from the city and district actually contacted council and said, look, you've got a particular product in place that you're using. We as a dairy company can do it better. We can do it cheaper. And obviously, you know, no one's expecting a business or council to drop whoever they've got currently utilising or providing a service to us. But when it's local companies, we need to be doing all we can to try and avail of their services. So at this point, unless there's a problem and we can't defer this because something needs to be in place, I would like to defer this in terms of having further conversations so that officers can maybe have a look at that motion again and come back to us with a way that we can put in within our own processes that we can utilise those businesses as best we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Doyle. I'm going to open it up to the floor if there's any other comments in relation to it. I see Councillor McGowan is indicating to come in. Go ahead, John.
Thanks. Denise, can you clarify? Do you see on the table there on page 148, up to 7,500 as director approval? That's, see, when you say a single, is it called a single tender? I'm trying to get the term you've used. Does that basically mean that under 7,500 that can just be signed off without three, or am I reading that wrong? And yeah, just would like to know that.
Councillor, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just referring to what Councillor Doyle has said, could I just get a wee bit of clarity? I know we go out to tender for, you know, preferred contractors and that. So is there another policy regarding that, or is this just whenever we have our preferred contractors, this is a policy we have in place? Because I think what Councillor Doyle, we would all have got, you know, different companies coming to us and say, how do you get on the preferred list? So is this after the fact? And then we have, I think you know what I'm trying to ask. I hope I've explained myself. All right, thank you.
Okay, and I think Councillor O'Neill is looking in online as well. Go ahead, Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on Councillor Doyle's point around the social clauses. You know, because as he said, we have passed the motion, you know, to go online in a way with the Preston model. Like, is this the policy that, you know, those clauses should be in? And if it is, then I'd be happy to second Councillor Doyle's proposal to just put this on hold until such time as that is updated. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to bring officers in just in relation to some of the clarities that they might be able to give before we move forward on this. Denise, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, members, for your comments and questions, and I'll try to address them as they come in there. So in terms of Councillor Doyle's motion, yeah, Councillor Doyle, we're obviously fully aware of the motion that has gone through in terms of community wealth building. I know that you and I have had a number of conversations about it before. In terms of this policy is really about approval limits and about what officers need to get in terms of quotations and going out to tender and who they need to approve it. As members will be aware, we do not have any legislation at the minute which allows us to put social clauses into the tendered documents. However, there is a section in this policy where we've said that we will include voluntary social clauses in the tender documents where we can, and we have done that. Members will be aware that for, you know, our large scale projects, we have included social clauses in it. Any of our CPD contracts, we include social clauses in all of them. But again, as I said, we don't have any legislation which covers us to include it in the tender documents at the minute. This policy is really about the approval limits at each stage. And in terms of what Councillor Doyle has said about utilising the small businesses, we are working very closely with our business team in terms of how we can encourage small businesses, how we can train them up. We're organising training events with them to encourage them to go for the tenders and working with them in whatever way we can. We are working with the business team to do that. I know that the Business and Culture Committee had a presentation in relation to the Preston model and community wealth, so they're looking at that. So officers are doing what we can do with that and continue to do so, given that we don't have the legislation, but we will continue to work on that, Councillor Doyle, and encourage as many local businesses as we can, and we're doing that internally. Councillor McGowan, in terms of your question in relation to the single tender action, I think you said page 148. If I can just get a single tender action is where there is only one supplier who is available to do the work for us. There's no other supplier there available. In that case, officers must complete a single tender action form documenting very clearly why there is no other supplier available, why we need to go with that supplier, and more importantly, the rates that supplier is charging must be benchmarked. Anything up to £7,500 must be approved by a director. So heads of service and lower do not have the authority to approve any single tender actions. It all has to be approved by a director up to £7,500. Anything between 7,500 to 20 is approved by the chief executive, and over 20 comes into yourselves as members. And that's the same limits for consultants. Whereas the normal approval process for normal tenders, it all goes back a stage. Heads of service can approve up to 7,500. The directors can approve up to 20. Chief executive can approve 20 to 30, and over 30 comes into yourself as members. In relation to Councillor Logue's comment, I think I hopefully might have answered that, Councillor Logue, that in terms of this policy, it is in relation to approvals and what limits must be adhered to, who must approve certain limits, and that's what this policy is really focused on. And Councillor O'Neill, I think I've answered yours in relation to Councillor Doyle, but happy to take any further comments on that. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Doyle. Yep.
Apologies, Chair. Where price checks have to be done with at least 2 suppliers for bids from £0 to £1,500. How does that actually manifest itself? Is there, whilst I know for larger public procurement, we can't take into consideration the geographic area, but are we talking that, an officer's able to sit and go, right, I know there's 2 dairy companies that do this, we can check out the prices from them, or does it have to be done on a basis where you have to go through a preferred bidder list? Are we able to do that? Thanks.
In terms of that, and if it's less than £1,500, as long as we don't have a preferred bidder list in a particular area, so say, for example, if we have a panel of contractors for grass cutting or things like that, then we have to use that. But in normal circumstances, if we're just looking for something and we're not pulling off a tender list, then we can literally just go onto the internet and get 2 price checks. So all officers are told at that time to use local firms, to use local companies. So if we know that there is, 4 local people who can provide that service, we would go to them 4 and do a price check just if it's less than £1,500. So it's very straightforward for that, and all we need is just that audit trail, just even a screenshot, an email, just to say that we have done that. But I would imagine 99% of the time, Councillor Doyle, that's with local companies, unless local companies cannot actually provide the service.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Doyle. Councillor McGowan has indicated he wishes to come back in. Go ahead, John.
No, thanks, Denise, for that. And I see you keep a register of decisions that are the STA. I see them there, the single tender. Would your audit trail also pick up to see if the same names kept appearing on that a lot? Would your audit trail pick up, if someone's getting 2 or 3 of them a year, that they're the only supplier? That's sort of the first question. The second question is, well, I suppose what Councillor Doyle and what Councillor O'Neill has said. I was at that meeting where we brought on the wealth building people, and I think the consensus of everybody, or most parties that night, was that where possible, we should be moving towards a situation where we try to get as much of the services that we need delivered here locally by as many social enterprises as possible. I also believe in that motion that someone was to maybe have a look at what we purchase and try to put a figure on it, what percentage of our spend across council is with social enterprises and what is with private sector organisations. So it's an area that's very dear to myself as well. I'm involved with community wealth building on another project, and I don't. If we pass this, does it shut the door on that, or is this just, as you say, we're just agreeing some limits here that all can be? Those limits will also be the same limits, for example, that would be, you know, for social enterprises. Thanks.
Okay, John. Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Denise wants to come in again. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McGowan. And in terms of the single tender actions, I can assure you trying to get a single tender action through council is very difficult, and trying to get all the relevant people to sign it. But yes, absolutely, our audit trail would pick it up if there is the same single tender action being issued to the same company a number of times throughout the year. So that would all be picked up by audit. And as you've mentioned there, the single tender action register, we also have a register of decisions for anything over £7,500. They're reported to GSP usually around June time, once a year. So Alfie brings those in once a year, but we report on those before we do the governance statement. So they're all brought in, so members are able to see all single tender actions, all register of decisions that have gone through for the year, and the audit trail would pick up if there was anything that we were concerned about. And just your second question, I know the Chief Executive is going to come in on this. That it absolutely doesn't close the door on this policy at all. This policy is really focused on approval limits, and we are working very closely within council right across the board in terms of encouraging social clauses, social enterprises, local businesses. But I'm just going to hand over to the Chief Executive now on that. Thanks.
Chair, thank you for allowing me in. I'm not going to add an awful lot more to what Denise just said, other than I think the primary question was, if in passing this today, does it mean that we can't bring forward further information with regard to utilisation of local companies? The answer is absolutely not the case. But I do think what we might do today is we might build in, where we can, a few more comments into this particular policy, which is about approval limits in relation to local companies, and then the separate piece of work that we're taking forward about the promotion of local companies, social enterprises, etc., through the notice of motion will come forward separately. But they are two distinct things. This policy is mostly about approval limits, where there is latitude in this policy to build in suggestions to staff that in some of the lower amounts in particular, where there is discretion as to which companies you go to, that we must put it in writing that we recommend that where possible local companies are utilised. But the fundamental issue is that they are two separate things. This is primarily procurement limits.
Okay, thank you, Denise and John, for those additional comments. Councillor McKinney is looking in. Go ahead, Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to I'm looking at the legal policy and framework. 12.3 on page 150. How does our situation affect EU procurement rules, the Treaty and Procurement Directive, international obligations? That's it, really. Did you hear me?
Yeah, no, we just must comply with all of those, with all that legislation and case law. We need to ensure that all our tender documents are fully compliant with all of that, Councillor McKinney.
That's fine. Thanks, Denise. I just a wee bit query about it, was all.
Okay, thanks everyone for the comments and debate on this. Councillor Doyle, I'm conscious you had indicated you were looking to make a proposal to defer. I'll bring you back in with the clarifications that have been brought. Is there anything you want to add now in relation to that?
No, Chair, I'm happy with what's been said. I'm happy to withdraw that, and just on the basis of what Chief Executive has said about maybe putting in some of that language. I'm sure we don't need to have that back to approve that. So if we could do that, then I'm perfectly happy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Emmett. Okay, members, can I have a proposal then for the adoption of that paper, please?
I'll propose it. Second
okay.
it.
Thank you, Councillor Logue and Councillor McKinney. Thank you. Okay, members, that moves us on to item 11, which is the North West Region Waste Management Group report to those charged with governance. I'm going to hand over to Colette. I think it's going to take us online. Colette.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So this is the North West Region Waste Management Group report to those charged with governance. This is the final version. I presented the draft version at the last audit committee, and this really is to confirm that the accounts were certified on the 14th of November. We only had one priority 2 finding, and that's been accepted by council. As I previously presented the document, I didn't intend to go through it, but I'm happy to take any members' questions on the document.
Yeah, thank you for that, Colette. Members, the papers are there. Happy to open up to the floor for any comments and questions. And if not, a proposer and seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Logue proposing it. A seconder, please. Councillor Doyle, happy to second. Okay, no dissent on that item. So thanks, Colette, for that item 11. I'm going to move to item 12, which is the North West Region Waste Management Group Joint Committee annual audit letter.
Yes, thank you. So this is the annual audit letter, which effectively marks the completion of the 21-22 audit of the financial statements for the North West Region Waste Management Group. The annual audit letter is a standard template covering key outcomes from the audit. The letter is published by council on the council's website, so it is actually an outward-facing document. There's no specific issues I wish to highlight within the report, but again, I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Okay, thank you again, Colette. So members, this letter that's there will be available for publication on the website. Again, any questions or any issues, and if not, a proposer and seconder, please. Councillor Doyle proposing. Thank you. And Councillor Logue seconding. Okay, members, thank you very much. Thank you, Colette, for those 2 items. Item 3 then is the Derry City and Manchester Council annual audit letter 21-22.
Yes, thank you. So this is the annual audit letter for the council. And sorry, I've just noticed that Rona has her hand up, but maybe it's on the last item.
Rona, do you want to come in on this item or on the previous one?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Colette. No, it's on item number 13. Thank you.
On item 13, okay. Yeah, so go ahead, Colette, and then I'll...
Okay, thank you. So the this is the annual audit letter for the completion of the, which marks the completion of the 21-22 audit of the financial statements of the council. Again, it's a standard template covering the key outcomes from the audit, and again, it will be published on the council's website for the public. The annual audit letter provides an overview of all the audits completed to date and the findings from those audits. Members will note a reference to the funding position regarding CODA, the City of Derry Airport, at paragraph 4, and also at paragraphs 6 and 7 of the document, references made to reserves held by council and the pressure on resources going forward, which I think has been previously mentioned in respect of the rates process. As there are no other issues to highlight within the report, I'm content to take any questions on it.
Okay, thank you for that, Colette. Rona, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question in relation of absence. Just noting the increase in absence over the years from 2021 to 21-22, the increase of 6.45. And I know it's documented within the report down to furlough and COVID, and I totally understand that. I was just really wanting to know how it was progressing in the current year, 22-23, if we're still seeing the same increase or whether it's coming down a little bit. So just more information on that would be great. Thank you, Chair. And then I'm happy to propose the document. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Rona. I'll take any other questions now. If anyone has any other additional questions in relation to it, and if not, just then on the issue of absence, if there's any clarities that can be brought forward, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Brona, for your question. Brona, in relation to absenteeism, the 10.37 days that was reported in 2021, that was obviously a reduction for us from the year before as well, a significant reduction, and it was really as a result of a number of our employees were on furlough and also the COVID-related absence. As you'll be aware, from this year, all COVID-related absence is now recorded as normal absence. And you know that the government guidelines now is still, you know, if you're displaying symptoms of flu-related illness, then please stay at home. So we are still seeing a significant amount of absence in relation to flu, COVID, and previously that would have been recorded as a COVID and not recorded as part of our absence figures. Now it is recorded as part of our absence, so that's why there was the significant increase. This year we're probably seeing more or less the same. We may have a slight reduction. We're just pulling together the figures at the minute, but it's probably more or less the same. We are seeing still increased absence, particularly in relation to COVID. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Brona, are you happy? You did say you're happy to propose it if you're content with that explanation. And
Yes, thank you, Chair.
okay, thanks, Brona. And any seconder for it, please? Seconded, Councillor Logue. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Colette, for those items. That moves us to item 14, which is the internal audit reports. Deborah's taking this. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the internal audit work carried out within Derry City and Strabane District Council in the period October 22 to January 23. The audit of PCSP has been recently finalised. Members will recall the internal audit undertook work on the PCSP relating to financial years 17-18 and 18-19 and reported the results to the Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee in July 2020. And at the request of members, completed a follow-up which was presented to the committee in October 2020. At that time, as a result of follow-up testing, internal audit was satisfied that significant progress had been made on the implementation of the recommendations from the original audit reports. However, the implementation of some recommendations around the grant payment process had been impacted as a result of COVID-19. At the date of audit fieldwork, September 2020, payments had not been made and the grant awards for the financial year being reviewed, and therefore internal audit were not in a position to test or provide assurance as to the level of implementation of the recommendations made relating to the payment of grants. Internal audit have recently completed a further follow-up audit to follow up on the status of the recommendations that were not fully implemented in October 2020. In assessing the level of implementation, internal audit undertook sample testing of a sample of grants awarded and correspondent invoices from the PCSP 2021-22 Small Grant Award Scheme. In total, 120 invoices were reviewed as part of audit testing. In summary, as a result of follow-up testing, internal audit is satisfied that significant progress has been made on the implementation of the outstanding recommendations. Of the 20 recommendations made, 17 of these have now been fully implemented and 3 partially implemented. As such, internal audit continue to provide the assurance level of satisfactory over this area, which is the highest rating available. Current position of each of the recommendations and the details of follow-up testing are set out in the attached report. Other internal audit work undertaken in this period. Internal audit also delivered 3 sessions of fraud awareness training to visitor services staff in October 2020, and internal audit also continued to be available across the council to carry out reviews of financial, governance and operational arrangements as required, working with management to ensure that they considered the risks and controls associated with any new or change to processes. There are no implications arising as a result of this business, and it's recommended that elected members consider and endorse the follow-up internal audit of PCSP. Happy to take any questions relevant to the audit work. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I'll declare at this stage I'm a member of the PCSP on behalf of Council. Happy to open it up to the floor if anyone has any questions for Deborah or officers in relation to it. And if there's no questions, proposer, Councillor Doyle, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and appreciate the report. Just on page 249, it's priority B1. It's partially implemented on the follow-up position of 112 invoices aspect of things. In terms of, I'm assuming that we're looking at this only on the basis of process. So I suppose what I'm getting at is 32 of the payments effectively had been signed by facilitators. And the key language there, I suppose, that sort of jumped on the mind was internal audit could not ascertain with any level of assurance whether these invoices had been created by the group or by the facilitator directly. What in essence does that mean? Because when I read it, I can think of 3 different ways to interpret it, but I'd be keen just to hear from an audit perspective what that means. And overall, whilst I know that the overall recommendation for this is, in terms of the report, is satisfactory, what do we do about the, are we content that next year, for example, or the next time an audit is carried out, that there won't be any partially implemented recommendations? Because for me, satisfactory would be all of the recommendations carried out, but just that language about not being able to ascertain with any level of assurance, I suppose that's what we're here for. So if somebody could clarify that for me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Doyle. Deborah?
Thanks for your comments, Councillor Doyle. In relation to that, in relation to facilitator expenses, a lot, I think I've alluded to different pieces of the report. Some of the invoices, a lot of them were created, well, not a lot of them, but some of them were created through like Microsoft Word products and things like that. So from that perspective, it's not easy for us to identify, whether the facilitator created the invoice or whether it was the group that was making the payment that created the invoice. So our previous recommendation had highlighted that if it was from the facilitator themselves, then that should be signed by them, as verification but from looking at them, it's not easy to tell when they were created in Microsoft Word, whether it's a facilitator or whether it's a group creating it. But kind of to back that up a bit, I suppose a lot of these groups, they are like going to local suppliers to get, the services and the products that they're looking for to deliver these projects. And as such, that kind of comes back on itself again, in that some local suppliers might be smaller in operation and not have as sophisticated systems. So I suppose that's where I'm coming from.
Just a quick follow-up here. Just in terms of, I'm sure there's a reason, but why does it matter who creates the invoice? Is there a particular audit reason why that's been highlighted? Because I can imagine what you're saying. If you get a yoga instructor or something, for example, they might not have ready-made invoices, but why is it a problem?
I suppose we've kind of clarified in the recommendation then and going forward that really we would recommend that all facilitator invoices be signed by the facilitator. And the reason of that, I suppose, is to make sure that, that facilitator did provide that service and the group themselves didn't just create a fictitious invoice. So that's really why we're requesting that it be signed by the facilitator.
Sorry, Chair, to come back again. So does that mean then, and I'm being very careful about my language with this, for the 32 that hadn't been signed, and of course we're not saying that people have created these off their own bat. If that's the case, have we been able to verify with all of the facilitators? I'm just going to check here because I think I might have seen that. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so for the 32 that weren't signed by a facilitator, that's fine that that's going to be sorted out from next year. But are we satisfied that all of those are above board?
Well, from an audit perspective, we've traced all the invoices right through to the bank statement and can see that those are coming out either through a BACS payment or if it's a cheque, we've also saw the cheque stub. So we're satisfied, there's nothing untoward going on. But I suppose just for a complete and transparent audit trail, we would like to see just that completeness, the facilitator signing it. Sorry, in relation to your second point, you raised, Councillor Doyle, in relation to, there's 3 partially implemented at the stage of follow-up audit, and that you'd said about in relation to, whether that would be satisfactory or not. from a lot of our audits undertaken, you know, we would do the audit and then come back and do a follow-up audit. It's unlikely that every recommendation would be fully implemented at that stage, you know. So, it's quite positive progress that's been made, and that 17 have now been fully implemented. Only 3 at this stage, you know, that were outstanding the last time have now been still partially, and it's better than not, if you know what I mean. There's been some progress made in those. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah, for talking us through those. Any other questions from any other members? And yeah, Councillor Logue, go ahead.
No question, just a comment. I'd just like to thank Deborah and the team for doing this follow-up audit, and I think it has a very good, pleasing report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia. Members, I've not seen any other indicated speakers, so can I have a proposer and a seconder for this item, please? So Councillor Doyle proposed, Councillor Logue seconding. Okay, members, thank you, Deborah, and officers for coming along for that item. Item 15, members, and item 16 are both open for information, which we usually just treat as such, unless anyone has any questions they want to ask in relation to those 2 items. So I'll hold it there for a second, see if anyone wants in. Councillor McGowan, yeah, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. It's really a question to Denise. I was reading through the report there, and there's a lot of good stuff on it. But, you know, in light of the circumstances that we're in, I was just curious, is there, in your audit, do you look at cost control as well? I know you look at performance, and you actually mention a few. I know you mentioned the Economic Development Standard as on page 288, I think. You talk about how that was met and how a number of the planning ones weren't met. But and I know in some of the other narrative you talk about the quarterly meetings with senior managers. Within your process, do you also look at cost control? And what I mean, you know, when we strike a rate, in essence, we give these strategic managers a budget. I'm wondering, you know, does part of your audit, if that budget is exceeded, is that picked up early or is it picked up quarter? I know it probably is in one of the other committees, but is it do you review that in your audit, or is that separate, or is that something that Alfie does? Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor McGowan. If I can just confirm as well before I answer you, this audit wasn't completed by us and our team with the internal audit. The improvement audit and assessment report is completed by the audit office. So Clet Kane's obviously here, so if you have any questions about that, I'm sure Clet will be happy to answer those questions in terms of the performance audit. But in relation to what you have asked about cost control, yeah, we do pick that up as whenever we're doing our internal audits. Obviously, the budgets have been set by management, by elected members, and we will ensure that those budgets are adhered to. But more importantly, they're also picked up by Alfie and his team. So every item of expenditure that goes through our accounts payable team must be signed off by one of our accountants before payment is actually made. The accountant will check to make sure it's within budget. There's a budget for it, and if not, that there's appropriate committee reports attached where it has been brought to your attention. So there's very, very tight controls in relation to that with Alfie and his team. I hope that answers your question. I think the Chief Executive.
And Chair, just to clarify, the quarterly budget control report is then brought into Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, where any sectional or departmental overspends or indeed underspends are all highlighted, and the rationale for that and the reason for that, and a recovery plan, if necessary, appended to it.
Okay, thanks, Denise. And that, yeah, John, go ahead.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. And then the second question, I know that, for example, I chair BNC, and I know that some of our smaller events, but they're pretty hefty numbers in terms of like the Jazz Festival costs about 125,000. But I'm told, maybe I've been told wrongly, but all spend that we do, I believe if there's other funders, if there's other funding in that, that's audited, and it's usually audited externally. But is it a case at the moment, and I know it is because I get some of the figures, but are we auditing some of our own spend? And if we are, is that good practice? And is there a limit? For example, if it's above a certain amount, because I think as we move forward, in light of what's happened with Invest in I, that all public money we spend, we should be spending it and ensuring that an audit trail is there, but we should be marking our own homework. I'm told that in some of the smaller spends we have, which can be 15K and more, that we sort of just provide a report to members. Do you audit that, Denise, or is it just done internally?
Yep, thanks, Councillor McGowan. In terms of specific projects, we obviously have our audit needs assessment and our audit plan, which has been approved by this committee, and we would, audit those areas and report back. We don't necessarily look at an individual project, but if we were auditing that area, we would select a sample of projects and provide an assurance on the sample of projects. If members have concerns about any particular project and they would like audit to have a look at it, that's no problem. We can also do that, and we have done so in the past. So we're not necessarily auditing our own homework, because obviously our internal audit team are independent. They've no operational management responsibility, but also, we also obviously have external audit who review our expenditure as well. So we've got that additional level of assurance. Anything that we spend could obviously be picked up in a sample, an audit sample, either by ourselves, an internal audit, or by external audit as a payment, and, ensuring that all the appropriate procedures have been followed, all the correct documentation is there. So, we, from an internal audit perspective, we review payments on a regular basis, no matter what audit we're looking at. And again, external audit will do the same, Councillor McGowan. So they could be picked up very randomly throughout the year by either ourselves or by external audit.
Thanks very much for that, Denise, and thanks, Councillor McGowan, for those questions. Chief Executive, go ahead.
And just to remind members through the chair, that Deborah reports to the head of the audit committee, not to an officer of council. So the only member of staff that doesn't ultimately report to me as chief executive is Deborah. She reports to the head of the audit committee, which guarantees that level of independence in terms of our internal audit procedures.
Okay, thanks for that. And I see Councillor Gunn's thanking officers in the chat box as well for the responses. Members, if there's no other indicated speakers for the items that are open for information, I'll draw things to a close this afternoon. Thanks everyone for attending here in the chamber. Given the weather, I wish you all a safe journey home. And for those that are online, stay warm. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.